Thank you for joining me on a quilting tale today. My name is Shaylin, and now that February is over, I wanted to share my progress on my 2026 goals, which I shared in this video here, and I'll link in the description. My goal in February was to finish my 2025 Year of Sewing Machines quilt, which was a mystery block of the month program by Heather Briggs of My So Quilty Life. I didn't get it finished, but I'm really close. So I thought in this video, I would show how I put the final block, the December block, together and share the other ones that I've made. You can see some of them behind me since the last video that I posted, which went through April. So I've made quite a few more, and we'll finish December in this video, and I'll also share the plans to finish it, the sashing and backing. There's some neat special touches that this quilt entails. And then I also started another quilt from Lo and Behold Stitchery. It's called Homespun Collective, and this is another block of the month program. The first month I have the pattern for, and I'm all caught up with it, and so I thought I'd share the progress on that. So I mentioned that quilt in that 2026 plan video, and it's coming along nicely. It's good to be on top of it right now and caught up. I hope to stay that way. The next pattern is going to be released in mid-March. And so I thought I would just share some other plans for little quick and easy projects that I would like to accomplish this month. And I've also narrowed down, I had 3 choices of patriotic quilts that I was considering for a commemorative quilt for the United States 250th anniversary in July. And so I've narrowed it down to 2. And so I'll talk about those a little more and what I think is going to be the deciding factor for what I'll choose, because I would like to start that quilt this month. So let's get right into it. We have a lot to cover today, and we'll start by finishing the final block of the 2025 Year of Sewing Machines. Let's go ahead and look at these blocks up close. First, a little recap of this program. In 2025, Heather Briggs of My So Quilty Life put out 1 block a month that was all sewing machine themed. Each sewing machine is unique, and there'd be a 6-inch block that you'd be making that kind of goes along with the month, or there was a star option if you didn't want the seasonal look. I'm doing all the seasonal blocks. So this one I've talked about in other videos, so just a quick recap. It's the one that set the tone for the rest of the block fabric choices I was making. This being January, I chose kind of a cooler bluey green color, and since it wasn't a vibrant blue, it's not a pastel, it's just more subtle and muted. That was what I was trying to go for with the remaining blocks. So when you do a mystery quilt, if you're not using a fabric bundle where everything coordinates, that is something to consider, is what's the look of the quilt that you want and what kinds of fabrics do you have that might complement your first choice, not knowing what the other blocks will be. So this one, the main body of the sewing machine, was a tilde print. I love these light mint accents throughout. I think complement it really well. And I just adore this mitten with the tree on it. I think it's really cute, and just love the colors. And I like this because I didn't have a lot of this fabric. I didn't have the line. And so I just liked the fabric and decided I would kick off the quilt with this and just see what I could build upon. So next is February, and this one had some scrappy hearts. So the left side all had the same fabric, and then I used different shades of pinks, kind of more corally colors in this one, and again, not too vibrant. I just wanted those kind of dustier colors, and so this one I really focused on cutting my pieces nice and straight so that these lines would show up nicely and not be going crooked, and so I thought it paid off really nicely. My March block has also been featured, and I talked about how I don't have a lot of green fabric, and the green I did have, I didn't have big pieces where the colors could work as far as being understated greens. And so I ended up picking this peachy color that had a lot of green on it. And so I just liked, this one was nice because it wasn't directional. And so it's just a scatter with the birds and the leaves on there and some of the words. And then, of course, I used my green scrap fabric to make the 3-leaf clover there. April is where I left off in my video. I have shown this block. And this one, not only I thought was just a beautiful machine the way it came together, but I had challenged myself to make a robin for my daughter instead of the bluebird that was just two-toned. I used multiple fabrics to put the colors of a robin there. And I just really liked how this actually ended up complementing the machine with the dark charcoal color, just echoing the traces around the flowers. And then I had the purple and kind of peachy coral colors were also in this scrap of purple. I used this purple fabric in my ombre puff quilt and had a little bit left. And so I thought, you know, for not planning it to coordinate so well doing a robin, it actually looked really nice. Now going forward, I have not shown any of these blocks. For May, I know that foxtail, the plant comes out, and I had this fabric with foxes, and my youngest daughter really loves foxes. So I thought, well, if I do a robin for my oldest, I should get one of my youngest's favorite animals in here too. And so I just thought this was really cute. I was, again, careful to cut so that I could keep it directional and keep the foxes all oriented in the right way. And then just used more scrap fabrics from past quilts. This one also came from my ombre puff quilt. And I just really liked how I used the peachy color again. It's just a more subtle version of pink. And just the little bits of background fabrics I have, those low volumes, I really get to highlight those in this quilt. This is the June block, and it's probably my favorite sewing machine out of all of them. I just love the detail in it, and just this large floral print looks really nice. I thought, oh, is this too bold for the other colors I've been doing? But I thought it's still not a bright red, and so I thought I'm going to just try it and keep it. And my later months did get a little darker too, and so I think it will still look good in the quilt and not out of place. But the 6-inch block was a strawberry. I used a little bit of a busier background, and even though it was directional, the pieces are so small that it comes across as a scattered look. So I was happy with that. And then I just made sure that my stripes, when I pieced them, were going in the same direction. But I just thought this one was really cute. And again, trying not to do bright, vivid reds, I had to rely on some more of my pinky red fabrics to use in the blocks that require red. July is where I kind of hit my first real snag. I actually had a completely different machine for it. I'll pop up a picture of how it looked. But I just thought I wanted it to seem a little more patriotic, red, white, and blue, because that's when Independence Day is in the United States. And the little popsicles are meant to be those rocket pops that are red, white, and blue. And again, I didn't want the bold red and blue, so I have these more muted ones. And so the original sewing machine that I used was just really dark, and it wasn't giving me the feeling of just red, white, and blue patriotic. And so I was just struggling with, how do I do that, but not making it really bright and vivid, because that's what I was trying to stay away from. And so I ended up using this fabric. It's a Tilda Winter collection. I can't remember the name. I'm going to pop it up because I'll look it up later. But I had some of it, and it's that sort of dusty blue color, and it has the red roses in it. So I thought that is a little more to my liking. So it still kind of contrasts with the brighter blue and the popsicles, but I thought, well, it's closer to what I'm looking for, and probably the closest thing I had in my stash that I thought could work. But I just think these popsicles are adorable. I thought that was a fun one to do for July. For August, I used another larger floral print. I think this is from the Midnight Garden collection. And then I have some French General fabric that I thought complemented it nicely and again kept that more muted red color. And then again, I had to think for the watermelon, I didn't want bright red. And so I tried to pick some softer tones while still making it look like a watermelon, and was able to use scraps from past quilts. This is probably my favorite of all the 6-inch blocks that I've done. I just love the angles on this one and just how the colors all play together. And here's my September. I didn't have much orange, and I had this one in mind because it's a really dusty or burnt orange. It's not a bright one like you might think of with fall leaves. Fig tree does a lot of nice oranges like this. I believe that's what this is a fig tree. For the leaf, I know I could have gone scrappy. I just didn't want it to be really busy. I wanted to keep it subtle because that's what I'm going for with this quilt. So I just picked a more yellowy orange for the leaf. And then I love this little twinkle fabric in the background has some different shades of orange that I thought were just perfect with it. So this one is a little more monochromatic than the other machines, but I still think it plays nicely with the colors that I've selected. This is my October block, and I love how this one looks. I didn't want a black machine. I thought that might just be too dark. And so I had this gray that has lots of black in it and chose some darker accents. And so I think it has that kind of October feeling. And then the little candy piece in her example was kind of grays and blacks. And I wanted a little more color in it because my September one was so monochromatic. And so I did find in my stash this kind of checkered black and orange. It looks distressed and a little more vintage, and so I thought that would look nice with this because again it's not really bright. And then I had this star background that has the black and gray and orange, and so yeah, it all looks great together. And then for November, I ended up using the machine I made for July. So this is actually the July machine pattern, but I just swapped out the block. And this 6-inch block, I think Heather's intention was for it to be a pumpkin. It didn't say what it was in the pattern, but when I watched her video when she was doing these during the sew along, she called it a pumpkin. And I thought, well, it looks like an apple. And for November, I was just thinking more like apple pie. We still had apples on our tree in November. It just felt more authentic to me to use an apple because that's what I would see more of in November. So I just changed it to, again, a dustier red color and used what I had planned for July. My intent, again, was, well, there's some blue in it, but I think with all the green, it just wasn't giving me the patriotic feeling I was going for. I'm going to pull July back out because the nice thing about this swap is that these two machines, they're not identical, but they're very similar. They both have kind of the same front. This one had the accent piece in the front, but their handles were just a simple knob. This one has an angled knob. And then the number of knobs is different, of course, but looking at the others, there are only 2 other blocks that have this little accent plate, and one is in the first column, one is in the third column, and so this will now be in the second column. So I thought, well, that spreads it out a little more. But the body styles are very similar compared to, for example, I think here's that June one again, where it has a very thin bar going across and a more angled front on both sides, and then a more intricate wheel or knob on the side. So I thought these two were pretty close for swapping out and wouldn't throw off the look of the quilt. But really, like I said, every machine is different. There are no identicals. And so it's going to be spread out and have a variety no matter which machines you chose. But it worked out, I think, to do that swap. So December is the only remaining block to make, and I thought I would demonstrate making it in this video. I'm going to use that same line that I ended up using for July, and it's called Merry Little Christmas Collection. And so I know I want to use the red here for the main body and the green for the present. I still need to pick some reds to go with the bow and then the smaller pieces of the machine. So I'm going to look through my stash and see what will complement. But when my favorite local quilt shop was having their inventory sale at the end of December, I was able to get some of this at 40% off, and I didn't want to get a whole bunch because it's not typically colors that I use, but it's so pretty. And I was thinking I could use it in this quilt because I've been using those subtle colors. So I ended up getting a half yard of a few of these prints, but I'm going to see what else I can get that will complement this, and then we'll start making it. All right, I think I've settled on what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to take that same fabric that I used in July to be the accent for the machine. So the spool and the side piece. And then this will be the present. So I want to keep the line together. And as far as the ribbon for the present, I had really wanted to use this scrap of red that I have here, but this was the main part of the apple in my November block, and it'll be right next to it. So I've used duplicate fabric, but I just feel like it's too close being right next to November. So I opted for some other French general fabric that I have in my stash. So I just have this thin scrap of this print left, and this will work for the ribbon. But for the bow, I thought I'd use this one because in her example, they're very close in color, but the bow is a little lighter. So well, hers looks nice. So I think this will look nice using them together on this as the main portion of the present. So I'm going to cut these up and then we'll start assembling. My pieces are cut out for making the 6.5 unfinished block. And so I'm going to start by just drawing diagonals on my C pieces. And you could skip this step if you have diagonal seam tape on your sewing machine. But I just recently got this little pen from Minky Kim's website. I think it's Sewing Illustrated, or I'll double check that. But anyway, it erases with heat when you iron, and it's been really nice. So I'm just enjoying using this one just as a little change of pace. I'm going to go ahead and mark these. This small block does not have a background, just like the one with a watermelon. Those are the only two. The others all have a background. And something I realized after doing my January block, just picking a white on white, was how much it kind of blended in with the white background of my big block. And so I've been trying to be intentional about picking something that's low volume, but still stands out a bit so you can clearly see that the machine has a little block on it. I've got those pieces ready, and so my next step is going to take one of my D units. I'm going to be making a right and left unit, so I just need to be careful of the placement on these. I'll have two C units on one side, so this will be my right unit when it's pressed out, and then I also will have two pieces on this side. And so when they're all pressed, these ones will make my left unit, and these ones will be folded over. And I'm going to get a little bit of the bird. I know part of it's going to get cut off in my 1/4-inch seam, but I'll still keep a piece of the bird in there. But this will be the right. And so, like I said, you could use diagonal seam tape. You could also fold these in half diagonally and press them and just sew along the crease. I'm going to sew right on those pen lines, and then I'll come back. So here's the cool part. When you apply heat, the pen marks just go and it doesn't leave anything on the iron. I'm just going to go ahead and fold these. First, give it a dry iron. And then I'm just going to use my mister bottle that just has tap water in it. And do it again. Just relaxing the threads, heating them first. And I have not been best pressing my fabrics like I normally would. There's some really small pieces in these blocks. 1/4-inch squares are the smallest, and there have been several of them. I'm finding that I'm still getting accurate piecing just using the clapper and the wool mat and just the steam from my mister bottle, but I could imagine that best pressing these will help you get even more accurate. I like to check the back and just make sure there's not crooked pieces of my top fabric, my green fabric, hanging out. And so if all looks good, just trim it a 1/4-inch away from where I stitched. Let me put it back under the clapper. Again, checking the back. This one I see a little overhang. I could use my rotary cutter, but since this is just a small amount, I'm just going to follow the outline of the D block, the rectangle, and just trim. And then I'll trim away on this one too. But really make sure you watch the placement on these ones because there is a right and left facing piece. Next step is to take my B and F pieces, and I just like to look at the picture, the orientation of how these will go so I don't, put a bird upside down or something. So I'm going to have one here. Since I have two sides, I might stagger to make the birds one at the top, one at the bottom, just for a little bit of symmetry. So now I'm going to just sew these and connect them and then make strips out of them. Okay, I'm going to press both of these to the inside. I'm just really trying to get the iron right into those threads there so that it's completely flat. I just kind of tug it toward me while I press toward me. And I'll do the top. So I'll make sure it's nice and straight. Again, I'm kind of pulling away from the centerpiece. All right, so now I'm going to make my left bow unit, and I just want to make sure I'm careful about which D unit I take. So this one is my left, and I want to add the bird piece. I'm going to do the bird piece on top because looking at the next step, the right unit, I see the green portion is on the left side here. And then you put this to the right of it. And I just want the birds a little more space, not both at the top. So just trying to make it look balanced. So I'm going to stitch this together and this together. And then once that's done, I'm going to take my A pieces and I'm going to put one on the top and bottom of each of these units. All right, my 2 side units are finished, and it's worth reminding to just as you complete each step of the unit, measure your pieces, straighten them up, if you need to trim them down, or if they're too small, the pattern tells you what size the unit should be. So if they're too small, maybe your seam allowance is too big, and readjust, because you want everything to fit together like puzzle pieces, and so it really does make a difference. So I would just remind you to check your sizing with each step. That's something I used to just kind of ignore, like, yeah, it's about that. But I've just found that piecing is so much easier and more accurate, and it just looks nicer when you're adjusting it as you go and make sure that it's what it should be. So one of the final steps is to make the center vertical ribbon. So I'm going to take my little G square and put it in between the E rectangles and then sew these together in a strip. So the final step is going to be sewing these 3 pieces together. We'll start by using several pins to keep it from shifting and just sew a 1/4 inch down. And then we'll sew this to the other side, get it pressed, and it'll be done. That's the great thing about these 6.5 inch blocks. They come together so quickly, and so it really motivates you to finish the rest of the machine. All right, here's my finished 6.5 inch block, and it is all trimmed up. Looks great. So I'm going to move on to the body of the machine now. And so what I'm going to need for that is mostly this red fabric. I'll use the white, brown, and gray. It's kind of a slate gray for the needle that I've been using. And then for those accent pieces, this little leftover strip from doing the July block is going to be enough. So I'll hold on to those. I've been saving all the remnants of the white fabric because, like I said, there's some pieces as small as 3/4 of an inch. And so even these little pieces can be used. And I think because I've been saving them and using them first before cutting more, I have so much white fabric left for compared to what the fabric requirements say. Now I still have the sashing to do, but I just still imagine I'm going to have a lot of white fabric left, which is fine. It's something I can always use. So I'm going to go ahead and get all these pieces cut. That's going to take me a while. It goes all the way down to double F when you're labeling the pieces. So I'll be back once those are all cut. So as you can see, lots of pieces. Some are really small. Some letters only have 1 piece. So there is a lot to cut. And that has been the case for all of the blocks making the sewing machine. But the nice thing is that because there's only 1 or a small handful per letter, it does come together quickly. And so you'll find that the machine is put together in no time. So every time I've made one of these blocks, the first step is always to pull the pieces that you're going to be sewing and flipping, or you're using them to snowball corners. And so these are the pieces I'm going to draw a diagonal line corner to corner, or like I said, you can just fold them diagonally and press, or use your diagonal seam tape. You just want to be careful because sometimes it'll say, like for fabric H, to take 1 of your squares, and that means we'll leave the other one intact these later. But all the others, we're going to be doing diagonal lines on them. And I find that the ones that are used to snowball a piece, where all four sides of a square or rectangle have the sew and flip corners, those ones seem to have the biggest piles, but they go quickly because, you know, you'll use 4 at a time. And so you'll get through the pile in no time. But I'm just going to take a couple minutes to get these lines drawn. All right, so I'm going to take the 1H square that I didn't draw a line on, and I'm going to snowball it with 4 of my double A squares. And I like to just place them and envision, you know, which side I want folded over. So if there's one that, like this one, has a lot of flour in it, and I see this one does as well, if I want that flour in there, I might put them across from each other. And then this one, maybe I want more red to show. And so I just kind of think about how that will look. But I'm going to go ahead and sew on those lines, stitch and flip, and we'll be back. Okay, so this is going to be the little knob or dial on the machine. That always seems to be the first thing that you make when it comes to the machine portion. So I'm just giving it a dry iron, and I'm just trying to press and follow where the seam is, trying not to go back and forth, but just kind of start at the seam and make my way to the corners. And just make sure all those seams are covered with the clapper. Once it's cooled, I'm checking for any overhang on the back. If it was significant, I'd take it out and redo it. But these ones, I just want to make sure I maintain the size of the white square underneath. Because again, we want these to fit together like a puzzle piece. So just taking a little bit off. That one probably won't come off there. Yeah. And so now I can trim, and the pattern does give pressing directions too. So most of the time you're just pressing toward the corners or the darker fabric, but sometimes though, for nesting purposes, they want you to press in different directions. So there's the knob, and I can decide, like, maybe I want that to be the bottom and the top. So I'll just keep that in mind as I connect it to my next pieces, which are going to be the 2 Ys. And so just move that out of the way. I just want to look at, you know, do I like how that looks? Maybe that's too much floral in the corner. So maybe I'll break it up like that. So I'm going to sew these 2 pieces onto this one. And then once those are attached, I will connect them to this S piece. And what's nice is the diagram shows you where every letter goes in it. So you can see, you know, am I supposed to orient it this way or this way? And so I can decide, you know, if I want that big flower to be in the bottom corner or this corner. So using that diagram is really helpful. Dial unit cooling. And again, it's a good idea to check that it's measuring the size that it should be. And then the next step is just to stitch and flip this corner here with the V piece and an L. Okay, we're just going to set that one aside for now. And next is the T unit. This is going to be the head of the machine that the needle attaches to. So again, I want to decide which way I want to orient the fabric, and I think I like this way. Now, we're going to put one of the larger H squares in the corner, and then the rest are going to be snowballed with O squares. So you just want to make sure that you're putting the squares in the right place. So I always start with the H because then I know the others are all the O squares and I won't get them mixed up. Okay, when I press these, this larger piece is actually going to be pressed toward the inside of the block. The others will all be pressed out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first. Just we'll get rid of the lines here. And so I'm just going to tuck it under and finger press it, making sure that my edges stay straight. Just going to do a dry press first, and then just fold that one toward the corner. I'm trying, since I've already pressed this one, I'm trying not to rub it, but just actually press instead of iron back and forth. I'll do a little bit of steam. And then on this side, hold the corners. It's a little hot. Okay, let those sit for a little bit. Okay, so here's what the front looks like. And the back, just making sure there's not a lot of overhang of the white pieces. And so I'm going to trim a 1/4 inch away. I always like to double check and make sure it's flipping back the right way, because this isn't the typical way I do the corners. And then we'll just set this aside for a few minutes while we do the needle unit next. Okay, to make the needle unit, it's always the same. The letters might be a little different, but you're going to take your gray needle color, attach the white rectangle below, and then once those are attached, I'm going to put a J piece on each side. Now, because these pieces are so skinny, I think it's really important to make sure that that bottom piece under the gray piece is sewn straight, because just a little bit off and crooked will show. Now, interestingly enough, when these are pressed, her directions have you press toward the center, which makes it kind of bulky. And I'm not sure the reason, except maybe to not have shadowing of the seam with the white fabric. Having done a bunch of these, I think you could press away from the center, away from the needle, but it looks fine. I just wanted it to look consistent after doing a couple of them. I didn't want to change the look. So this is one area, though, that, I mean, I don't mind a little bit of the shadowing in the back. I don't think it's terribly distracting, but it's a personal preference. But yeah, it does make for a thicker centerpiece there. So the next step is to connect the needle to the bottom of the head of the sewing machine. Sometimes these pieces are wider in the direction, say, to trim, and then other times it's like this where it just matches up just right. But after these two pieces are sewn together, you'll attach the B piece to the left. All right, I'm going to put this piece aside, and now it's time to make the spool unit. I'm going to take my double B piece and then just sew and flip the upper corners here. And those are my R pieces, some of them. Okay, there's my little spool piece. And then I'm going to stitch my F rectangle and my G rectangle on either side like this. All right, my spool is done cooling. Now I'm going to take my A rectangle and my 3X pieces and going to put them on 3 corners. Again, I can see through the fabric to kind of see which side will be left when I flip it. So I'm kind of making that decision as I place them. So the bottom left stays empty. I'm going to stitch and flip those corners. All right, this is the fun part where you get to see the machine start to come together. So here's the order that will sew this unit together. We're going to take this A unit and first sew it to the dial unit or the H unit. Once those 2 pieces are sewn, again, this is all with a 1/4 inch, we'll sew the V unit. And right now it doesn't look like it's the same length, but once you get those 1/4 inch seams in there, it should be just right. And then we'll do the spool unit. We'll go on top of this one. You could actually sew this one together and then this one together, kind of in a chain piece style. And then it doesn't say to at this point, but you could, after these 4 pieces are connected, you could attach the front of the sewing machine on there, or you could save it till later in the directions. So I'm going to go ahead and put these 2 together to sew a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to put these 2 together to sew a 1/4 inch. All right, here it is so far. And I'm going to go ahead and attach the front of the machine. What's nice about these blocks is that there are very few angles to have to line up, but this is one of the places where you do. You're going to want your point to just flow right into this horizontal seam here. And so if your pieces are all measured correctly and everything's accurate, it should just naturally do that. But what you want to just make sure is that where the fabric meets on the edge here of the machine and the background, that little point is a 1/4 inch away from the top bar seam. So that way when you sew it, it'll be a 1/4 inch higher with this edge here. So just really watch for that. I forgot to mention with the present block too, that little center square, it's so tiny, but you do want to make sure that the center of the bow, the points there, that they are also lined up with the center of this. And so again, if everything's measured correctly, it should just do that. But if not, and you have to fudge it a little bit, just keep those centers aligned. So there's very few points where you have to pay close attention like that, but this is one of them, and same thing with the center of the present. All right, so I just want to check the connection here. It looks great before I press it. It wants it pressed toward the A unit, this big white space here. So I'm just finger pressing first, making sure the seam is flat underneath. I'm just doing it from the top because it allows me to make sure I really get into the seam there, that it gets flat. that's how it's looking so far. So the next is to make the little wheel unit on the right hand side. I'm going to cover a few steps here. So I'm going to take the CC piece and snowball the corners with the remaining 4 R pieces. Then we'll take a Z piece and attach a P rectangle on the top and bottom. And then once those are connected, they'll get sewn together. And again, they'll be the same size when they're connected. The Z piece will actually go on the left. And then from there, we'll take the 2 I pieces and attach to the top and bottom. And finally, the M rectangle will attach on the right. So lots of steps. They all go very quickly. I'm going to put this together now and show you the side piece. All right, there's that wheel piece. And at this point, again, I'm just kind of skipping around in the directions, but you could finish the machine off by sewing these 2 pieces together. And then once that's sewn, the long strip E piece goes across the top. So that would complete the top portion. So I'll do that, but I also want to talk about the bottom portion. So to make the base, it's kind of 3 separate pieces. And so I'm going to talk about the left end first. You'll start with your W rectangle, and we'll be using the remaining L squares here. We're going to put a square in the upper right corner, do the sew and flip. Once that's done, we'll attach an N rectangle to the left side. And then we'll come back and talk about the shelf portion in a moment. The present block, the 6.5 inch unfinished block, will go in the middle of these 2 units. And then the right unit, which is going to be a larger one, you'll take your U piece and put a square in the upper right corner, sew and flip. And then you'll take the K rectangle and it will go on the right end of the U unit. And then underneath that, you're going to have your shelving with your brown fabric. Now, again, that present will be in the middle, but just to fit it all in the camera, I'm just going to leave that gap there to represent where the present is. So for the shelf on the shorter side, on the left side, you'll take your brown rectangle and sew and flip to the bottom left corner. And then that will eventually get sewn onto this piece. And then on this side, we're going to have our 2 pieces, and we're going to sew and flip on both bottom corners, like so. And you'll want to follow the pressing directions because one will be pressed toward the brown, and then one will be pressed toward the white corner, and the same thing on here. So when you connect these 2 pieces, the seam allowances will nest and just lock into place, so you'll get a nice point when you sew these together. And so again, that will make the middle section. And then it finishes off. So these are sewn together, and then you'll attach the D piece present in the middle, and then this brown shelf or table will sew to the U unit, followed by your C piece. And so you'll have this big unit, this unit, and then the present in the middle. They all get sewn together, and that's the bottom portion of the block, and it's ready to attach at that point to the top portion with the main body of the machine. So I'm going to get these all assembled, and then I'll show you what the two halves look like. All right, I wanted to just show you in the middle of everything what I'm doing here. I went ahead and stitched on one of the little corner pieces to each of these. And if this is your first time or even the first few blocks like this, I would follow the directions one step at a time. But because this is my 12th block, I've made so many, I kind of have a feel for how this comes together and trust how it will go together. And so I'm doing multiple steps at once just to save some time and do some chain piecing. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch and flip all these pieces, trim them down if necessary, and that will allow me to just attach whatever piece is next. And I'll also do the same as I'm completing the bottom. I'm going to also complete the top portion, so get the wheel attached and that top horizontal strip going across the whole thing. I just want to take care of it all at once. For this piece here, the W, I'm going to have to double check what I showed when I put the square down. The square should be in the upper left corner. And then you just want to follow the pressing directions. So I'm going to just get all these pieces ready and trimmed. For the bottom table pieces that join, I'll sew and flip these after, because I can go ahead and just attach the other bottom corners first, and that way I don't mix up which direction I'm pressing. So I'm going to attach those next. This one I can go ahead and trim. This is part of the front. I feel like I might need to get more water in my bottle soon. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Just a little overlap there. Again, you can use your rotary cutter, but when it's a small piece like this and so little, I'm not that particular. Okay, so that's ready, and I'm just double checking my diagram here. This is going to get sewn on and stitched this way. So I have that one ready to go. This one is going to get the K piece, and I'll just put everything I'm going to sew on the right hand side. So that's ready to go. This one, just trim that a little bit off. And I'll trim this. Okay, and this is the front portion of the table. The pattern actually says to press toward the brown, but it's not interlocking with anything. I'm going to go ahead and connect this to the D piece, because that's going to be the base. So I'm just looking at anything I can connect. I'll sew across this way. And like I said, I have these where I'm going to add the corner, and then I'll also go ahead and sew this wheel onto the machine. So I have lots of pieces I can sew in one step. And again, if you can keep them all straight and you feel comfortable doing that, this is just to save some time with chain piecing, but otherwise follow one step at a time. There's no problem doing that. Here is my finished December block with that green present. And I just love the vintage look of this one with the more muted burgundy and blue and green in here. It definitely looks like a vintage Christmas machine. So really like that line, just pulled off December very well. So I will show you in a moment what this looks like with all the others. You can see the full effect and how they all look together. But I also want to talk about how I'm going to finish this quilt. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to stop at making this block, but there's more to do still, and that's going to be my March project. I still want to start a new quilt in March, but I do want to get this one finished. So let me show you what's left. So first of all, I'm going to need to make 16 sashing pieces to go on the side of each block. And Heather Briggs did not stop at the charming details with the machines and their little mini blocks. Even the sashing has some beautiful little options here. A spool, a pincushion, a dish, a jar, or just an empty shelf or table, whatever you want to call it. Now, in her example, she does 3 of each item and then 4 of the blank sashing pieces. And I think I am going to do that too. I just liked how it looked proportionally. So those next several pages of this is just how to make each of these individual sashing pieces. So that'll be a later video. But let me show you what the final quilt looks like. There are actually 2 options. I'm just going to cover some of the directions, but there's 2 setting options. This is the one I'm going to do with the sashing pieces with the different items, and you can see some are empty, like that one. And then there's this kind of scalloped looking border, and I just thought that's a fun way to do a border. I've never done one like that. It looks like it's very similar to the shelves, just upside down. And so I'm really used to making those pieces now. So I think it should come together pretty quickly. So the other option is setting number 2. And this one is just a lot simpler, cleaner lines, just straight strips and just all the empty shelf pieces. So either looks lovely, it's just personal preference. I just love all those individual touches and a chance to make this quilt even more customizable. So I'm going to do option 1, but I don't think you could go wrong with either. So for my border, I'm going to be using a Kona Sage. Move this out of the way. It looks like this. And I chose it by just taking scraps from my blocks and holding it up to this wall of Kona solids that a local fabric store had. And I thought this one just looked really pretty next to so many of them. I have a few blocks that are very close to this color. My January, May, and July block are all kind of this bluey green, subtle color. And so I thought that would look really nice. For the backing, I chose this art gallery print called Willow. And this is one that I already had in my stash. I bought it at a deeply discounted price because I finished the bolt at my local quilt shop, but I still don't have quite enough to do a full backing of just this. So I'm going to show you my plan for it, but I just wanted to point out how nicely it looks with this sage color. And then I see so many of the other colors I've used in the quilt. So I've got the gray like in the October block. Even these darker kind of teal leaves remind me of the November, the deep blue that I used in that one. And then there's this gold, kind of a gold brown color. It reminds me of my April block with the robin. And then the shelves themselves are kind of a warm, rich brown color. I have the dark pinks and the corally pinks in several of the blocks. So I thought this would just be really pretty. And I'm actually excited about not having enough because I'm going to do a pieced backing that I think is just going to look great. So Heather's backing option was to give you an opportunity to put 2025 on the back. And I love how even the 0 is made of a sewing machine, a 6.5-inch block like the ones we've been making in the top. I thought for this, since I don't have quite enough, the only difference that I'm going to do is use my sage fabric to build around the 2025. So this is all going to be sage. And then I'll be able to piece my backing because it is directional. So I'll kind of have a seam right here, but they can go side by side, and a seam here that can go side by side. And so I think that will look really nice because that sage looks so beautiful with that fabric. And so for the numbers, I'm just going to have to pick fabrics and colors that will really pop against the sage. So I was thinking even white. For the sewing machine, I know this is a little brighter than what I've been using, the pinks and the bright yellow. I really wanted a white machine, but with the white background, it just would get lost, I felt. So I just like the vintage roses in this. And I think because it's just a small block making the 0, that this would be really pretty. And then maybe I'd use just some solid white or some low volume whites to do the other numbers. The other nice thing she included was, in addition to the 5, she has a 6, 7, and 8. So you could change the year if you wanted. And that's my question I'd like to pose. This was the 2025 year of sewing machine. So part of me wants to just keep it as 5 because that's when the project happened, but I'm finishing it in 2026. I started it in 2025. So I'm just still on the fence about if I should make that a 5 or a 6. And I'd just be curious in the comments what your reasoning would be for doing either year. I don't think I can go wrong with either, but I'd just like to hear input because sometimes it helps steer me one way or the other. But that's going to be my plan for the backing. So now let's take a look at all the blocks together. Okay, I've got them pinned up with just a little room between each so I can pin sashing strips later. But you can see that it goes all the way to the floor. But looking at them all together, I think it's just very cohesive. Nothing seems to stand out as out of place. I just think it was really fun to shop my stash and use a lot of fabrics and scraps, especially in those small blocks. Making those, I went through a lot of my scraps. It was nice to make a bit of a dent in them and get to revisit some old fabrics that I really loved in past quilts. So I will definitely do a follow-up video on this when all the sashing pieces are in and the border and the top is just completely done, and I'll share some plans for how I want to have it quilted. But I'm going to stop there. And now I want to talk about another project that I started in February. So in my 2026 project video, I mentioned doing the Homespun Block of the Month project as one of my projects this year. And this is going to be a Christmas themed quilt. The first month when I got the pattern, I got this folder in the mail, and it had all kinds of goodies in it, including some stickers. I've used a couple of them already, checklists, and just what you need to get started. But let me pull out my picture one more time. This is the color scheme that I'm going with. I was able to do this on a program called Pre-Quilt that came with purchasing the patterns, and you could just test out a bunch of colors by different fabric manufacturers. And so this is what I decided I wanted to do and make it my Christmas quilt. And so this Sew Along started in February and it goes through September. And so it's several months long. And I just wanted to show you my progress on month 1 because I am actually caught up. I'm keeping all the pieces for now in this decorative box. I'm sure it's going to outgrow it as it gets bigger. But there were 3 main pieces to construct. And it came with little labels. And I'm just kind of pinning them wrapped around because they are long. So this is my checkerboard, and there's 2 of them. That's this piece right here, the top and bottom. And so I have both of those here. And what's nice about participating in this is you also get to not only be in a community group where you can see everyone else's progress and kind of cheer each other on, but you also get access to videos with tips for how to piece each of these sections. And I have just found those to be invaluable in helping me with accuracy. Even this right here, a little stay stitch to help keep the seams from unraveling where they're connected, making it less than a 1/4 inch, is something that I just hadn't thought to do, but I think will really help hold it together nicely. And then the other big takeaway I've had that has made a difference with accuracy and getting these to be the size that I want them to be is just checking each piece as I connect another, just measuring it, fixing that seam allowance if it's too big or small, or trimming it down if the seam allowance is too small. Just really making sure it's accurate at each step, because then by the end, when I measure it, I'm just blown away by how exact it's been. And so that has been just a project in accuracy for me. Then we also, during month 1, made the stripe blocks. And so that's going to be these pieces right here. I have those 2. And again, they are stay stitched, especially with those open seams, just keeping them together, because over time and moving them around, I know that open seams especially can come apart. And then the last piece are these diamond and a square units. There's several on top and on bottom for a total of 10. And these were a different way of making a diamond and a square. You can see that some sides were much bigger. But again, just keeping them accurate and the right size. I just love how this is going to come together, really like fitting puzzle pieces together. So those were the 3 pieces that go with this main quilt. But the other fun thing that comes with the program is there's several remnants, and you can make a mystery quilt that will be revealed a month at a time, and by the end you'll see what you're making. But she said it's going to be a generous lap size quilt in the end, made out of the scraps and leftover pieces. So I just have them kind of clipped together, made these half square triangle strips. There's more of the checkerboard, they're just thinner here. And then there's also these checkered prints. Now, one of them, it was this one. My greens were so close together, these 2, that I think it was this green was supposed to be where I put the white. And I thought, oh, it's just way too close. And I wasn't sure what we were making. I still ended up with the 2 greens by each other. But I thought this breaks it up a little more. So I didn't follow it exactly with the directions as far as using the lettered colors. I strayed a little bit because I did have some of this off-white left over. But I am excited to see what this is going to turn out to be. So I just have them labeled by month and block. And right now it's very clear which pieces go to the mystery quilt and which ones go to the homespun quilt. But I'm sure eventually I'm going to need to separate them out because this box is going to get full quickly. But that's my progress on Homespun. March 13th is when the second month's pattern releases, and looking ahead, it looks like we'll be making these green sawtooth stars. So there's a few. There's a solid, there's one with an opening, there's one with the diamond in a square. So there's a few of those to make. So that should be a lot of fun to see it come together, and just use more of the color palette, bring in some of this burgundy color here. So I look forward to that. Now, in my 2026 project video, I said my goal for March was to make a patriotic quilt to commemorate the 250th anniversary of the United States this July. And I had 3 options. I've narrowed it down to 2, and I'm going to tell you my reasoning. Most people wanted to see me do the Starly quilt, which looks like this, and I'd be doing it in some red, white, blue, and pinks. And I think that one would be really pretty. And then I still am keeping Catalina in here because I feel like, as far as the length of time, I was going to do the Celebrate with Quilts. That was one of the options. I think that one would take the longest. And given that I'm still finishing the Year of Sewing Machines and trying to keep up with Homespun, I just feel like that's too much. I definitely think Starly is the quickest one to do, and it was the one that most people requested to see. The reason I'm keeping this one in is because a viewer made an excellent point, I thought, about how red, white, and blue are the colors of many countries. And so to do Starly, it might not read, just United States, but that one with the flags would seem more like a commemorative quilt for the United States specifically. And so that point really resonated with me. So this one is still on the table as an option. I think what it's going to come down to is, how much time do I have? And I know I'm setting this deadline about being done in March, and I might not. It might carry over. But I do want to take the Year of Sewing Machines quilt and whichever patriotic quilt I make to the long armor at the same time, because she's about an hour away, and I just want to be able to have it back in time to get it bound and use it come this summer. So I don't want it to take too long and be pushed too far down the line. So that's why I think doing either of these would be a better option for me to still finish and get to use it this year. So that's just a little update. We'll see how long it takes me to finish Year of Sewing Machines and Homespun. And I don't know, who knows? Maybe I'll just get far enough ahead where I can work on both. We'll see. So in addition to making progress on those quilts, there are a couple smaller, fun, quick projects that I also want to do in March, and I thought I'd share those with you. This adorable, incredibly soft fabric, it's by Cloud9, and the line is called Forest Friends by the Good Twin. It's so sweet, and I bought a bunch of it because my intent is to make pillowcases for my daughters with these. I have done summer with glow-in-the-dark, kind of camping themed fabric. I've done a quilted pillow with Halloween prints. I had a video on how I made those, and then I also have Christmas pillowcases. I've made them. So I thought they needed something in that gap between Christmas and summer. And so I thought these little forest creatures would be just the ticket and perfect for spring with all the florals and butterflies. And I just love these little mice with the strawberries. This one is called Strawberry Mice. This one is called Mushroom Bunnies. And their faces are just so precious. And then I got this fabric, also part of the same Forest Friends line. I thought this would be good for the side trim piece of the pillow, and then I just need to pick something skinny for the flange. But I will link the tutorial where I learned how to make these pillows from Quilt Addicts Anonymous, and those should come together easily in one day. The other thing I've been collecting for probably about a year and a half when I go into antique stores, you may have seen a video I did a few years ago about making pincushions out of antiques. And my collection of antiques are piling up and they need to be turned into pincushions. So let me show you what I have. So back in November, they had a lot of Christmas stuff out in one of my favorite antique stores. And I found both of these, this little sleigh that says Noel. And this, I'm guessing, is a tea light holder. It's shallow, but I thought the Santa was so sweet with his little pack on his back. And so I thought these would make great pin cushions. And I would just keep them displayed in my bookshelf just year round. And then when the season comes, put them out on my sewing table to swap out. So I have those for the Christmas season. This one kind of goes with the dog theme that I have going on. I never set out to make just dog pin cushions, but those were the plant holders that just really jumped out to me when I saw them, and I thought they were cute, and they were much larger than this one. So I found this one when I was in an antique shop in Missouri. When I had gone to Hamilton, Missouri, we stopped at an antique shop, and I found this one, and I thought it would be a great way to commemorate that trip. The florals on it would make it a great one for spring, and it would just go with all the other dogs that I've made pin cushions out of. So I think this is just a little plant holder perhaps, but again, anything that has a circular or round opening can make a great pin cushion. So again, I'll link the video if you're curious of how I'm going to turn these into pin cushions. I will just probably end up showing them finished, not demonstrate how to make them, because it'll just be kind of redundant. This, I don't know if this is like a little egg cup or what this is, but I just really love this tranquil scene on it with the little gristmill and the outbuildings and the foresty scene. I just thought it was so pretty, and I don't know, just gives me a sense of peace when I look at it. So I thought just having that rounded pin cushion on the top would be great. And finally, this was a recent find. One of my favorite antique shops has all their Easter and spring stuff out right now. And I found this little chick. He does have a bit of chips in his face, but it just gives him character. And I love how he's hugging the Easter egg that's cracked open there. So I'm thinking this was a planter at one point as well. But I'd love to have him on my sewing table as just a cheery Easter display for this time of year. So again, I think I could easily do all of these in a day. Just it's a matter of picking fabric, cutting it to size, just doing a running stitch to shape it how I want and fill it. I will probably use polyfill, I think has been my favorite filling to try out, and then hot glue it in. And so it really does come together quickly, and the fun part is picking out fabric that'll look nice with it. So these are my small, quick and easy March projects that I hope to be able to show at the end of March, that I've made some progress on these, as well as my quilt tops. I have some lofty ambitions for March, and I have no deadline but my own, so there's no pressure or stress about completing all of these. If I finish the 2025 Year of Sewing Machines quilt before the end of March, I'll be sure to share the progress on that. I did get my Knitted Blooms quilt, which I finished in January, quilted and back from the long armor. It is gorgeous. I just need to bind it, and so I'm going to save that one as a little surprise in a future video when it's completely finished, but I'm looking forward to sharing that. So lots to look forward to. I hope you've enjoyed seeing the progress on some of these projects I'm working on, and that these videos serve as a way to teach new tips or inspire. That's always my goal here. If you like what you see, I always appreciate the thumbs up and subscribing. Until next time, happy quilting.